Friday morning, I hopped on the train at 6 o'clock in the morning in Lent, Metro Park, to drive down to Washington, D.C. And so it was kind of dark, and it was kind of like everybody was kind of half awake, half asleep. So I slipped into my seat, and sitting across from me was a young man. And he was looking at me like there was something up. There was no doubt about it. He was giving me the eye that I felt like I did something wrong, whatever. And he was just like, very, I don't know what's the word I'm trying to think of here, concerned about my presence. Didn't think anything of it, kept going. So, same thing kind of happens down in Washington when I get to the seminary. I only wore like jeans and like a t-shirt, so I guess I kind of look like a little sloppy, a little beat up, a little messed up or whatever. And so I'm coming out and there's a guy dressed up kind of nice, and he looks at me, and this time it's not like threatening, like he's like wondering what, now it's just absolute disdain. Have you ever had that feeling in your life? Has anybody ever looked at you and been like, nice outfit, kind of thinking, or, obviously the shelter's down the street, this is the seminary, starts with an S, but you got the wrong stop. You know what I'm talking about? So I say this because it's a reality. We judge people by how they look. We think about things. We have these things that go on in our hearts. Which reminds me of this story that I heard from Deepak Chopra. Anybody hear him? He's kind of like a guru. He's actually a medical doctor. He writes books and stuff like that. And so he tells the story about a friend that he knew who had 2 dogs. And the friend of the 2 dogs also had a fireplace. And the dogs, for whatever reason, were drawn to the fireplace. Like getting in there, making a mess, all kinds of stuff. So he put up this glass shield in front of the fireplace to keep the dogs out of it, which makes perfectly good sense. You could see the beauty of it. It was really nice. It had all kinds of stuff kind of edged into it, whatever, and it was really very beautiful. But he quickly had to take it down. He had to take it down because the one dog would go by every day and stop and see its reflection, but did not know that it was its reflection. Thought it was another dog. Back up, tail down, it began to bark, relentlessly, all the time. It was afraid. It was defending its territory. It was concerned that what was on the other side was another dog trying to get into its space. It showed anger. It showed its authority. It showed its power. And it was the smallest of the 2. The other dog went by, stopped, barked once, recognized that it was simply its reflection, and moved on. This continued to go on until the friend had to get rid of the glass because the barking became incessant, disruptive, difficult to deal with. I bring this up, those 2 stories up, only because they are exactly what the scripture describes. Isaiah is a prophet. And Isaiah is talking to the Hebrew people about their return to Jerusalem. He's talking about, there's different pieces to Isaiah. Kind of not sure if it's all one person. It's definitely not all written at one time. There's a pre-Isaiah before the people, the Jewish people get taken away by the Babylonians. There's the piece of Isaiah that they say was written while they were in exile, and there's the piece that is in return. But part of the reason that Isaiah says that the people get taken into exile is not just because the Babylonians are such tough guys, mean-spirited empires of the world. He says that the reason why you're getting taken away, and not in this section but another, is that you know what you do? You treat each other poorly. You do not see yourself in the eyes of the other Hebrews. He says, you know what? You know how you built this country? You know how you built this world? You built it on your brothers and sisters' slave labor. And now that's coming back to roost. He says there's an upper class, a middle class, and a lower class, and you're treating the lower class people bad. And that's the reason why the Babylonians are taking you away. He says you deserve it, which is the only way to respond to that is ouch. But then he says that in a reorientation, when you return, God tells me that he's creating a new thing. God tells me that there's a newness to who you are. And it's interesting because in Isaiah, it's not that it's a rebuild. It's not a ripped down rebuild. But it's taking who you are. If you look at that very subtly and very carefully, I'm renewing you. In other words, Isaiah tells them that God tells him to tell them that you need to look in that mirror. That in that glass of the people that you think of as least, last, and lost is you. And to restore the holiness of your life means that you need to restore the holiness of that who is in the reflection. Paul talks about this in Philippians because he has this come to Jesus moment, for lack of a better term, when he starts to describe what kind of a great Pharisee he was. He starts to talk about how great he is and how super he was and how absolutely embarrassed he is about his behavior. Because he comes to recognize that he's not worshiping God, but he's worshiping Saul. Do we know anyone like that? Do we ever have that experience where someone says, let me show you how great I am? Let me pull you aside. Let's talk about how super I am, how wonderful I am, how amazing I am. But it's not for me, trust me. It's for somebody else. It's for your greater good. And so Paul's embarrassed by his own behavior. He comes to that moment when he realizes that all he's done, all his study, his time, his effort is hollow. He's been doing it to make Paul feel good. There's no kids here, right? We sometimes refer to that as spiritual masturbation. That's what he did. And that was what it was about. And so he comes to this sense that he's embarrassed of himself. He has neglected God in his very search and chase and challenge to be about God. He says, oh my gosh, I've been doing all these things. I've been saying all these things. I've been murdering people in the name of God. And now, how does it feel? He says, I should be looking at people and not see an other. I should be looking at people the way Jesus looks at people and see myself. I've been standing in front of the fireplace too long, barking. Which brings us to the gospel, which is, again, kind of the same story. Does anybody know that it's the same Mary in more than one? Who knows? It's the same Mary of Mary and Martha. Do we know the Mary and Martha story? Right? So Mary and Martha had Jesus over at a dinner party. And so Martha's working away in the kitchen. She's doing this, she's doing that, she's setting the table, she's doing all this stuff. And she's looking for her sister who's supposed to be her side person. You're my ride-along person. You're my go-to. Where are you? And where is Mary? She's sitting at Jesus' feet. And what does Mary say? Oh, you're with God? Totally fine. No problem. Enjoy it. I'll just take care of everything else. No, she flips. She starts attacking Mary. She's like, what are you doing? And then she says to God, and only Martha would say something because nobody else would say this. God, can't somebody help me out? But she's not looking up. She's talking to Christ who's sitting in her living room. She says, tell my sister to quit fooling around. Tell her to quit listening to you. It's not a spiritual moment. Your life is not all spirituality. I need you to do this. I have expectations. Stuff needs to get done. Let's go. I wonder if we've ever been on either side of that conversation. Have we been the ones who attacked because somebody wanted us to do something instead of taking care of ourselves? To be still, to be in rest, to be in respite. And instead of being like, oh, you know what? I see you're having a moment here. I'll chill on you. They flip on you instead. Or maybe you've done that to somebody else. Maybe you've been so sure that they're so wrong that we need to do something with them, right? We talked about this morning. Blamers Anonymous. If something goes wrong, I gotta find someone to blame. Hi, my name is Tim and I blame. Anything that goes wrong, it's not about taking responsibility or accountability. It's about whether it's my fault or somebody else's fault. And someone needs to get punished for it. I don't care if I'm the only person in the house. Someone's got to get punished for this. Right? Just saying. Could not be anybody here. Right? So you got that one. And then you have Judas, who also totally jumps on Mary too. But Judas is worse because, well, one, it's Judas, and you're all thinking the same thing. Well, it's Judas. But also, what he says to her is very telling. What he says to her is that it's for the common good that you shouldn't be wasteful. For the common good, you shouldn't be doing that. And I wonder if we ever have that moment. Well, this is for the common good. Don't be wasteful. Don't just throw that away on somebody. Don't just lavish that perfume on someone. It neglects and ignores the common good. And I think that's the reason why it's very specific. It's not like, oh, he puts it on Jesus' head. In this gospel reading in John, throws it on his feet. Now, I don't know about you, but when people put perfume on, I don't know many people who put perfume on their feet. Or cologne. Usually you put cologne kind of like by your head and stuff like that so everyone can smell it. It has value. It has something that's, everyone can enjoy. You know what I'm talking about? Remotely. But I don't know anyone who goes around smelling other people's feet. So there's a lot of layers to this sense that this is being wasted. But the author's telling us a bunch of things here. First of all, the author's telling us about the feet, which we all know about, the foot washing and all that stuff, where the rubber meets the road, where God meets the everyday, the messed up, the mucked up, the beaten, the broken, the road, the journey. And that's where she's putting it. And when she's lavishing that love, she's giving all that she has, her most valuable possession, to this person. Now, there's one way to preach about this and say that in our worship and in our life with Christ, we should be pouring out our all in all. And I would imagine that some people may use this in November when they're saying, hey, when you're going to give to the church, let's talk about Mary lavishing and giving, what could be considered $12,000, blah, 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 blah. Not buying it. I think the story about this is that Mary isn't thinking Jesus Christ. Mary's thinking reflection of humanity and soul. And while her sister barks, and while Judas barks, and if you're offended that maybe you feel like I'm saying that somebody is like Judas and Martha, I'm sorry. But not as sorry as I would be that you're like, I don't know who he's talking about. It's not somebody here, I think it's just a sense. That she stops barking. She sees everybody else barking at the image. She sees the God of Jesus in the right then and there. She sees that everything that the world and the universe is about is reflecting in that image. And she sees herself. There's this music group called Clay Jars. I've got it written down somewhere. And so one of their songs is They Will Know We Are Christians by Our Love. But I was at seminary and I saw a lot of, really? I've been to a lot of churches. Really? I think most people come here because they've had some church experiences and they're like, really? They'll know you're Christians by your love, huh? Do they know that they're Christians by their disdain? By their annoyance? By their self-righteousness? Just saying. And so Mary calls us all out on this because I'm as guilty as anyone. for judging books by their covers, judging stories by their words, by the volume, by the intensity, by what I think is most important at that moment in that time. Mary says, stop barking. She says that, don't you see, the Holy Communion that we just participated in is in the very body and soul of who is in that reflection. And it's not just somebody else. What if we could look at a mirror, not just a glass mirror, and we saw that the common, basic, obvious is completely holy and looking us back in the mirror.